Center for Cellular Imaging, which is your host. So we are a national microscope infrastructure. Within Sweden, we are receiving funding, of course, from different agencies, right? But also we are receiving money from the Science Life Lab. So that's not specifically speaking a university. That would be more like a research institute in a way, okay? And then we are also being part of many networks, your bioimaging, so on and so forth. But at the same time, we also receive funding from other agencies, so we have to keep in track what services can we provide to who and what type of authentication we can have and so on and so forth, because it can become sometimes a hurdle. But if we go right now also to our services, so we have a quite broad repertoire of microscopes available at the facility. So on the light microscopy, you will see that we go all the way from, let's say, conventional confocal, passing through super resolution and also light sheet. As you can imagine, then the amount of questions that we get are quite broad, and also the requests for support, right? Then we are also collaborating with a group that is doing multi-imaging mass spectrometry imaging, that we also do a lot of correlative between different modalities and multi. And of course, we have also a big part of our services are an electron microscopy. In particular, we have a TEM and SEM. And what we really love to do is volume EM and try to correlate different modalities with the EM. So a lot of processing steps also included in there. And so you will see the staff, you will see that we all have a very broad background, because as all the questions are so broad, that's our advantage. Our advantage is to have the expertise in many different levels that we can actually support the different projects. So now, given the scope of the facility that has all of these modalities of different microscopy, then the question is, how are we handling the data? And I think if we're going to talk about image analysis, we also need to talk a little bit about data management, how the data flows within the facility. So that's the first thing that I wanted to try to describe to you. So in a way, the facility is divided, you could think about it in 3 different networks. So one of them would be the network of the microscopes. That's kind of the most secure network, okay? And that's where the microscopes, they don't even have access to the internet, okay? They are in an intranet, and we want them as isolated as possible. Then once you acquire your images, of course, the users want to take the images out of them. So the way to do it is that everything happens via the network transfer services, okay? You will never put a USB or a hardware device into our microscopes. And then you have different possibilities in here. Let's say 60% of the users, most of the time, they just want the images out. They don't want any image analysis services provided. So then we use what we call a transfer server via the NAS. And right now we're changing into an Omero, and I will discuss that later. Sometimes they also say, okay, I want to do some processing, but I want to keep the data within your infrastructure. And I think that we shouldn't forget things like post-processing steps that has to happen as close as possible to the microscope, because we have for example, Sense software that can handle this easier than if they take it outside of the infrastructure. So they will send that data into more sort of workstations where they will do this. And then after that, they can decide when to take it out. And if they really need processing capacities that are beyond that, then they might send it to one of our image analysis servers. So we have 2 Windows servers from Aquifer, Hive. You might be aware of them. If not, I can explain a bit more. And also recently, I think I mentioned this in one of my questions yesterday, is that we are experimenting a lot with web-based interactions with our users via web Gnosis from this company, Scalable Minds. Now, there is this very specific rule: data cannot flow backwards. So data cannot flow back into the microscopes. So once the data left the microscopes into, let's say, the image analysis or office network, it can stay there, but it cannot flow back to the microscopes. And then once you take it outside of the facility, then that's your data. If you would like later on to have an image analysis service, then we have to discuss, and we bring it ourselves into our service. Okay. Now, to provide image analysis services, so we have a few different machines here. I think that if we keep track of things, so in the microscopy rooms, of course, there is a lot of steps that happens there already. Classically, things like stitching, shading correction, things like that they will do. We will train them how to do this during the training of the microscopes. So during the training of the microscope for your specific project, we will already know that you want to do large tilings or certain things. So we will expect you to know how to do certain post-processing steps. So then for us, the computers that are at the microscope room are very important. And of those we have 12 machines, okay, that are taking care of these steps. Then that can be transferred to image analysis workstations. Of those we have about 5, if I counted correctly. And then that will handle, let's say, a broad range of services already. Okay, but in this case, we have trained the users to do this. We are not providing the image analysis service themselves. We are just training them, and we have given advice to them. then we have the possibility of then start transferring data into our hives. And of those, we have two. The reason for that is that we have now microscopes that are very scary in the amount of data that they produce and the speed at which they produce this. So we have one dedicated hive for those scary machines. Okay? And that is what I like to call more like the post-processing machine, because it's really more about handling that very large data and making it then digestible for the next steps. Okay? And that you need more rules to access that. That is not so easy, but we will give you access if you need them. And then we have what we call the user service. And that's the hive that is more open for everyone, that if you want to have access, what we are doing right now with our IT is that everything works via VPN rules. So we will create for you a VPN access to that machine. IT here actually has been quite nice because there are procedures for any external researcher to have an account on that VPN. But there are certain rules that apply. But that we have to discuss, and then this is the only sort of administrative hurdle that we can discuss a bit later if you're interested in. But in order to remote to those machines, you need the correct VPN access. And then we have the collaborative platform, which is WebNosos, which we are using quite a lot. And that in a way fits a little bit into actually the three ways in which we give services. So we have access to the workstations, we have collaborative projects, and we have full project support. And this, I think, connects a lot to what Genevieve was talking about yesterday in a way. Now, for the Homero part, so what is quite interesting is that we are trying, and I think Anna also kind of pointed at this, within Sweden, there is now an effort to create what they are calling a national Homero instance. Okay? And that kind of arrived more or less at the same time that with GIU, we're actually creating our own new Homero instance. What is new about it is that it was not going to run in our hardware. We wanted to run this in their servers. Okay, so we were creating together with IT a strategy to be able to have Homero instances running at will in our infrastructure. So we will have one for the CCI, but for example, Robert, he's a user. He really loves Homero, but right now we don't allow you to keep the data there because you are a user. You need to keep the data. You need to get the data out at some point. So then we'll say, Robert, you really love it. We can talk to you together with IT, and they can create for you an Homero. Okay, so that was our idea, to provide that extra service. But in a way now, there is also the push for a national Homero instance. So we are having to tackle that in two fronts. And I think that there are advantages and disadvantages to both. And I think that what I want to do is that I think for the national instance, what is going to happen is this access model is going to be probably one of the hurdles. So I think both things are still relevant. So I think to have a local solution at your institution together with a national solution, it's probably something that is going to become relevant in the future. And with that, I just want to say thanks. And if you have any questions, the idea is that we still have some minutes, I hope.
Yep. I think we're easily one or two. I would immediately have one, because you have pointed out there is 12 computers and then there's another 5 and so on. Who is doing the administration of all of them? Because, I mean, not all of these will always work 100% perfect. Something needs to be updated and some... Okay. How happy are you with that? How much time is this taking you?
No, but so the thing is like this. So a few words perhaps that is important. So for the machines that are sitting in the microscope, what happens is that many of them are still within. We have service contracts. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if something breaks in the machine, of course that will not be part, but we still have some sort of support from the companies. But we have to keep software updates and blah 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 blah. Yep. And for all the rest, we are managing ourselves. So it is an effort. Yeah.
Yep.
Ish.
Can everybody raise their hand that uses Homero? Okay.
Can I take a picture of this just for the record? Okay. Okay.
How seriously? I mean, to what extent? How seriously? Your question is who used Homero, but what do you mean? You mean seriously committed to Homero, or you have tried for some reason?
Seriously.
Seriously, even less than that. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
So one thing that is becoming, I think, at this level, which is becoming very interesting, is that what we want to do is that we want to make sure that the advantage of using the Homero is going to be that once the data is in this Homero instance, then you can access all the high performance stuff.
Or no, I think I'm just curious who does that. Yeah.
So I think that sometimes those of us that before were not many so serious and so on, I think that this will open many doors in the future because the data is already there, well established. And to copy that database then to the high performance to do some stuff, it will become much easier from an IT point of view. And I think also another thing that we have to discuss, and I don't want to steal too much time, is data conversions. I think that's also something that we might have to seriously think about. To what you are doing is something also that we are trying to do, is that during the transfer process that you can opt for the fact that I want you to please change my data into a standard format. We don't want to enforce it, but we want in the future that this is an option so that people can do this on the transfer. So then after that, of course, then the problem is that we have to be very careful that we can manage the metadata correctly, right? So that would be our commitment, that when you click yes, but I think right now we're at a stage where we can do this, especially because most of our file formats are not so diverse. For the EM, we have some challenges, but for the LM, I think we are good to go.